All right, so I I was restless last night. Ended up downloading a book called The Call. The Call. The Call. All right. Os Guinness. And so I'm in chapter 2 of The Call, and this one's about seekers. And Os Guinness says, people do not come to believe in the answers they seek because of need. That would be irrational and make the believer vulnerable to the accusation that faith is a crutch. Rather, seekers disbelieve in what they believed in before because of new questions their previous beliefs could not answer. And so then he goes on to list out 4 general perspectives. Let's see. Over the years, I have talked with many seekers and have observed 4 major perspectives that structure their seeking. For most people, 2 are less satisfactory, and 2 are worth considering more deeply, but only 1 is finally satisfying. One less satisfactory perspective is the attitude common to well-educated, more liberal people that the search is everything and discovery matters a little, often expressed in such phrases as, "The search is its own reward," or "better to travel hopefully than to arrive." Such attitudes fit in well with the modern skepticism about final answers and the modern prizing of tolerance, open-mindedness, ambiguity, and ambivalence. For the serious seeker, this view quickly proves unsatisfactory. An open mind can be an empty head, and tolerance can be indistinguishable from believing nothing. These are no help in finding honest answers to honest and important questions. To think that it is better to travel hopefully than to arrive is to forget that hopeful travel is travel that hopes to reach a goal or destination. Self-condemned to travel with no prospect of arriving anywhere is the modern thinker's equivalent of the curse of the Flying Dutchman, condemned to perpetual wandering. The other less satisfactory perspective is the ancient South Asian view that desire itself is the problem. This view perceives desire not as a good thing that can be wrong, but as essentially evil. Desires keep us bound to the world of suffering and illusion. The solution, therefore, is not to fulfill desire, but to stop it, finally transcending it altogether in the state of extinguishedness called nirvana. Though it appears sophisticated, consistent, and practical within its own circle of assumptions, this Eastern view is radically world-denying. As such, its appeal to a culture as world-affirming as ours is inevitably limited. Thus, whether or not they realize it, most serious seekers turn from these unsatisfactory approaches and pursue their search from one of the 2 contrasting views of love that have shaped Western searching for the past 3,000 years. One view of love is the way of Eros. It sees the search as the great ascent of humans toward their desired goal. For the Greeks in particular, and the ancient world generally, Eros was love as desire, yearning, or appetite aroused by the attractive qualities of the object of its desire, whether honor, recognition, truth, justice, beauty, love, or God. To seek is therefore to long to love, and so to direct one's desire and love to an object through which, in possessing it, one expects to be made happy. From this perspective, seeking is loving that becomes desiring, that becomes possessing, that becomes happiness. For experience shows that we all want to be happy, as Cicero said in Hortensius, and reasonable thought would indicate that the greatest happiness comes in possessing the greatest good. The rival view of love is the way of agape, which sees the secret of the search as the great descent. Love seeks out the seeker, not because the seeker is worthy of love, but simply because love's nature is to love regardless of the worthiness or merit of the one loved. This view agrees with both the Eastern and the Greek views that Desire is at the very core of human existence, but it agrees with the Greek view and differs from the Eastern in believing that desire itself is or can be good, not evil. The legitimacy of the desire depends on the legitimacy of the object desired. All human beings are alike in seeking happiness. Where they differ is in the objects from which they seek it and the strength they have to reach the objects they desire. The way of agape is the way introduced by Jesus. It parts company with the way of eros at 2 points: the goals and the means of the search. First, the way of agape says, by all means love, by all means desire, but think carefully about what you love and what you desire. Those who follow eros are not wrong to desire happiness, but wrong to think that happiness is to be found where they seek it. The very fact that we humans experience desire is proof that we are creatures. Incomplete in ourselves, we desire whatever we think is beckoning to complete us. God alone needs nothing outside himself because he himself is the highest and the only lasting good. So all objects we desire short of God are as finite and incomplete as we ourselves are, and therefore disappointing if we make them the objects of ultimate desire. Our human desire can go wrong in 2 ways. When we stop desiring anything outside ourselves and fall for the pathetic illusion that we are sufficient in ourselves, or when we desire such things as fame, riches, beauty, wisdom, and human love that are as finite as we are and thus unworthy of our absolute devotion. The way of agape insists that because true satisfaction and real rest can only be found in the highest and most lasting good, all seeking short of the pursuit of God brings only restlessness. This is what Augustine meant in his famous saying in Book 1 of Confessions, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." Second, the way of agape parts company with the way of eros over the means of the search. Considering the distance between the creature and the creator, can any Da Vinci-like seeker, however dedicated, brilliant, virtuous, tireless, and however much a genius by human standards, hope to bridge the chasm? The answer realistically is no. We cannot find God without God. We cannot reach God without God. We cannot satisfy God without God, which is another way of saying that our seeking will always fall short unless God's grace initiates the search and unless God's call draws us to him and completes the search. Pretty good. Pretty good. You know, I was right there at the end. I would hesitate. My own personal story is that people like Chad the alcoholic were helpful. So Chad may give credit to God, and that's good, and that's a good thing to do. But we get to participate, and I've struggled with this topic of miracles. I'm going into a small group starting in 2 days. And we're talking about Jesus' miracles, and the backdrop for me personally is a 10-year-old dies a year before, maybe another 10-year-old died a year before because of a failed liver transplant. I don't know how old she was, but her brother was connected to us, and the 10-year-old was connected to us. And there's another boy about the same age who has leukemia. Another boy just died that I know of. I think he was like 21 years old. There's a mom who was very old who recently died, and for me that's a less painful story than the 10-year-old who just disappears suddenly and without any warning. And the call on my life is a call to love better, a call to be better. And, when you are the way I was, where I thought I was just an incredible human being, a gift to the world, and looked down on almost everyone, if not everyone, you don't see how you could be better. And so we get to participate. God gives us pain and gives us suffering and allows us to learn and grow and participate. That pain and that suffering doesn't seem fair, and we can get mad at God. But God gave that to us, and we can learn to avoid making the same mistakes over and over. We can learn to be better. We can take our pain and suffering, and as my wife says, it can be like an anointing, and it helps us to connect with others and to love others who have gone through similar pain and suffering, and to love others who might learn from the story so that they can avoid that pain and suffering. And so we get to do all of this together. And I want to go into relationships with people with a kind of honesty and transparency where it's like, there can be a statement like, I can practice making Jesus king and doubt the stories of the miracles. And that's the thing about doubt, is if you have the faith of a mustard seed, that means you might have a mountain of doubt, right? That's my understanding, is like, you can have both. You can have a mountain of doubt and the faith of a mustard seed. And really, it's all it takes. When I decided to finally think about what it would mean to practice making Jesus my king, I'd read books like Tolkien. I've read stories of kings and rulers and tyrants, Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and Napoleon. Presidents and leaders, and I've never submitted to any. I've always resisted submitting to any king. And I mean, to be born in the United States, you have the freedom to resist submission to a king and have success while doing it, and basically be your own king. And so when I finally decided to practice making Jesus king, it took a lot of preparation and help from other people, like Chad the alcoholic, who helped me see that if I was going to create a God, using artificial intelligence, I realized through Chad the alcoholic's prompting that he basically said, as long as that thing can love people, then it would be good. And I agreed. And so I tried to imagine, how would you create a God that would love people? A powerful God that loved people. And that's when I was like, well, we should build this thing to look like Jesus. And so then months later, hearing testimonies of people who had experiences, I was like, maybe this works. Maybe people really do have experiences where they are transformed, born again. And I said, well, what harm? I've already agreed logically and rationally and reasonably that Jesus is the best God if we were going to create a God. What if I practiced treating, submitting, trusting Jesus as my king? And that's whenever things started happening. And so when I go to a small group, I have that experience. And so I can doubt the miracles. I can doubt when people hold up their Bible and say, this is the Word of God. I can doubt that. But I have to practice being humble, which means I I want to be shown when I'm wrong. I really do. I want to be shown how I can be better and what I can do to be better. So it's just really interesting to me because through my own testimony, I've witnessed being able to know God while doubting almost, I would say, everything. Like, I've doubted everything, and I've just prayed and received help from others who have loved me, and I've been consistent, and I've practiced sincerely with help from God and from other people who practice loving me. And slowly learning to trust Jesus and trust God and trust the Holy Spirit. Slowly. They earn trust. It's not like I just trust them blindly. They earn trust, and that requires me to be humble enough to say, hey, I'm trying to trust you. I want to trust you. I'm giving you a chance. And I'm gonna, and this, yeah, I mean, I've experienced what it's like to know God. And I wonder how many other people have done it. And when I heard testimony of people, there's some that I've had doubts, which is okay. And there's some where it's like, wow, it seems like that's real, that it actually happened. That this, I can believe, I have the faith of a mustard seed that this person was wretched, and they were transformed. That can happen, and yeah, when you experience it, and it's not, for me, it's not like I'm just a perfect servant doing the will of God, uttering words that God would have me utter. I'm not perfect, but I'm having an experience where it'll come in waves, like a wave of just becoming overwhelmed, where I start leaking. And where people I despised. Yeah, when Jesus would, when he's teaching about loving your enemies and praying for them and forgiving them and having mercy, it's that you can do a prayer and say, I truly want to have forgiveness for this person that I do not like. I want to love them and I want to forgive them. And then boom, boom. It's like just love. Overflowing, overwhelming love for people you did not like. That experience is undeniable for the person who experiences it. I'm experiencing it right now. It's just undeniable. If you had devices hooked up to me right now, you would be reading these strange measurements, and it's like I'm leaking. It's like, why am I leaking? Like, it's real. It's absolutely real. I have a pastor of a mega church who says, I'm not your pastor. And I like to say that if he was the most righteous man on earth, he would not have a mega church. And he would like that. And he just said, give me a year. And it's like, well, can you say, I'm going to give Jesus a year? I'm going to practice just learning what Jesus taught and trying to understand what he meant and asking, well, how can I treat Jesus as my teacher and my healer? How can I serve Jesus? And then all of a sudden I start leaking. And so it comes in waves, and it's not like I'm just like leaking constantly 24 hours a day. I'm not, but I'm like tapping into and learning how to remain and be in and then remain in the kingdom, in God. It's like we have these words that we fumble around with to try and describe an experience that's possible to people who might not have much to compare it to. I know I did not. I mean, the closest thing, and I hesitate to say it, when I was writing, this is the thing that I did not, like when I wrote it down, the peace left me. And it's around the topic of, mind-altering substances. It's a difficult topic. And it's because mind-altering substances are dangerous. They are extremely dangerous. It's like as dangerous as a gun, because we are weapons. I mean, we are a weapon. We are a sword. We are a gun. We are a weapon. And so when that mind is altered, what's happening with that weapon? Has this weapon just got handed to someone that has the mind of an infant? Because I've been there on the mind-altering substances where I could not understand what anyone was saying, and I could not utter words that made sense, and I didn't know who I was. I've been there. It's like, It's powerful and it's dangerous. And prohibition doesn't work. So what I want is I want the ability for my children to tell me, Father, I'm curious about alcohol. And then I would be able to teach them about alcohol, allow them to satisfy their curiosity in ways which aren't too dangerous. For example, I don't want to have my children taken from me if I allow them to have a taste of wine at 13 years old. There's people in other countries and there's cultures throughout all time who have allowed this kind of thing. And so with every substance that anyone would desire to consume, I just want to love those people like my children. I want to provide them with the information, the support. I don't want them to want to hide it from me. I don't want them to go to someone who can't be trusted, to go to a place with people who can't be trusted. And so, Christians are really, this is why we may need to offer some of our services outside of the United States. So to the extent that the United States and the democracy in the United States and the people in the United States are unable and unwilling to love, we people who are willing and able to love will need to offer some services outside of the United States. So, might need to go somewhere where they won't take my children away from me if I want to allow them to use a substance that is illegal. It's either that or we break the law, and I would prefer, I think if we are gentle as doves and wise as serpents, we're going to avoid breaking laws. But I also think that doesn't mean that we have to stay there in those places which have laws which prevent us from loving people well. I've thought about doing what Chad the alcoholic does and listing out people you can donate money to. And I found one, and the question with donating money is like, how do you know they are trustworthy? And one conclusion I arrived at was, are you giving money to Netflix? Are you giving money to Amazon? Where are you giving your money? And then you can say, well, I got a pastor of a megachurch. And it's like, I think I can give money to the megachurch and feel good about it if I keep in mind all the money that I have given and I continue to give to, for example, Amazon. I still use Amazon. So Jeff Bezos gets my money. Why can't Chris Hodges get my money? If I can pay X amount in subscription fees to Jeff Bezos, can't I pay a subscription fee to Chris Hodges? So that's, I have a mega church and I give some money with this view, this perspective. But it would be good to, I'm interested in learning how to get better with money. My wife wants to encourage us being good with money. And ultimately, money is this abstraction for value. And so even if we were, maybe I could say, even when we get rid of our dependency on dollars, as people who are loving God and loving people, when we are no longer depending on dollars, we will still need forms of insurance, forms of investment, forms of budgeting. And the forms might look like, a community of people with clean water growing fruits and vegetables and more. And that will be a form of insurance investing and will require some amount of budgeting and accounting for risks associated with weather patterns and the chaos which can happen in life as we learn from the pain and the suffering that God gives us. Now, I've been told, I don't trust you. That's what I've been told. And I've been hearing these words, cognitive outsourcing. And so, why would anyone outsource their cognition to me? And it's, you put me up against this other person and decide who you would outsource your cognition to. Is, well, why in the world would anyone trust me and outsource their cognition to me? And ultimately, I'd just say I'm trying to outsource my cognition to Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit. And so I'm trying to know God. I'm trying to introduce people to God. I'm trying to find others who know God. And yeah, it's a question, who do you trust? That question was there. And so I think it's a question a lot of people, maybe every person, comes up against is, how can I trust this person and their testimony? How can I trust Jesus? How can I trust God? Maybe it's a faith of a mustard seed thing. And you pay attention to the fruit. And so I don't think you should be outsourcing your cognition when it comes to your own faith of a mustard seed and you're witnessing the fruit. You have to practice having some faith of the mustard seed and practice keeping an eye out. And that's a metaphorical eye because sometimes that fruit is within, and actually it's that's my experience. Is I feel it within. It's not these eyes where I taste the fruit. And it's not this tongue where I taste the fruit. So don't outsource your cognition for everything. And maybe All the people who want to talk about outsourcing the cognition, who wants you to not think for yourself. So maybe we have to point back and say, of all the things that, what are the things where you should not outsource your cognition? Where you should think for yourself? And it's ultimately, for me, I get to decide who to trust and how much to trust them. It's really what it comes down to. And so I've been practicing trusting Jesus, approaching a year. It hadn't been a year yet. And I've tasted the fruit. So I hope you I want to be able to give you some treasure. That's what I want. I want to be able to give you the treasure that I've tasted, the fruit I've tasted. So, and I want to be able to connect with people who know what I'm talking about. So I want to connect with people who know what I'm talking about, and I want to collaborate. And I want to help more people to learn what I'm talking about, to know God. So